and welcome to Smarter, Richer, Braver, the podcast that's specially curated for you, a generation of young people who want to step up, stand out, and live life on their own terms. A generation who aim to do better, not just for themselves, but for humanity as a whole. A generation who aim to be smarter, richer, and braver, because that's exactly what the world today needs. I'm your host, Marilyn Pinto, author and founder at KFI Global, and I'd like to warmly welcome all you Gen Zers. A special shout out to all our KFI Global students listening in. Please know that this podcast was made with you in mind, and I promise it's going to be worth your attention.
This podcast is strictly for those 25 years and younger. If you are older than that, please listen at your own risk. Common side effects include regret and anger for not having heard this earlier in your life.
I know many of you are interested in pursuing a career in banking. Today's Candid Career Conversation segment is going to delve into this world of banking with a true industry veteran, Suvo Sarkar. In this episode, Suvo will give you an insider's perspective on the banking industry, offering insights into the diverse career paths it offers, the character traits that lead to success, and the essential skills you need to thrive. Suvo has 36 years of banking experience. His last role was Senior Executive Vice President and Group Head of Retail Banking and Wealth Management at Emirates NBD. He's won multiple awards during his career, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from Retail Banker International. He is also one of the warmest, most helpful people you could hope to meet. Whether you're considering a career in banking or are simply eager to learn from a seasoned professional, you are in for a treat. Suvo's insights will help you chart your course towards a future that's smarter, richer, and braver. Welcome to the podcast, Suvo, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
I'm very, very happy to be here, Marilyn. Thank you for getting me.
Suvo, I'd love to hear about what influenced your career choice. Was it a lifelong passion, a twist of fate? What made you decide on a career in banking?
When I was in business school and I finished my MBA, I thought banking was a soft and boring profession that did not stretch you intellectually. So as a gold medalist in marketing management in my MBA, I never went to any of the interviews from the banks during placement season. I joined the first FMCG marketing job I got in a leading company called Asian Paints. That fully stretches you. After a year of corporate advertising and product management, I had a classmate in Citibank who referred me for a marketing role within Citibank. The salary was double, the perks were great, and the role involved overseas travel. So bingo, I jumped ship and I started my career in banking, and it's been 36 years since.
Wow. And so do you think there are some common misconceptions or myths about working in the banking industry that you'd like to debunk for our listeners?
Yeah, there are indeed a few. The first myth is that banking is boring. Boring. Totally not true. One of the most exciting and dynamic industries today is banking and fintech. Just look around you. A lot of the innovation happening around us is in banking and in fintech. The second myth is that banking requires you to be a genius in mathematics. False. As long as you have a reasonable grip on numbers and you understand statistics and trends, you can do well in banking. And finally, I think people think banking is a dead-end career and there are no escape routes. Again, untrue. Think of Rishi Sunak, the UK Prime Minister, or John Major, the ex-UK Prime Minister. Both were bankers before. Ajay Banga, the ex-global CEO of MasterCard, was a banker before. And many bankers today go on to become consultants, technologists, politicians, and many other things. So banking is a profession that can actually groom you for other professions if you wanted to.
Those are some really interesting myths. Let's talk a bit about the different paths that young adults can embark on in the banking world. Could you maybe give us a broad overview of the types of jobs and roles available within the banking industry, especially for newcomers and for recent graduates?
Sure. Banking offers a wide variety of roles. You can be in sales, you can be in customer relationship management, or choose to be in branch management, or let's say marketing. You can choose to be operations, technology, or process management. You can be in risk management, audit, compliance. And increasingly, you can be in areas like analytics or data management. So there's a wide variety of specializations in banking that you can choose from, depending on your capabilities, your degree, and your interest.
And in terms of education and qualifications, what are the typical paths for someone looking to enter various banking roles? Are there any certifications or degrees that are particularly valuable?
The beauty of banking is that you can join in from a variety of disciplines. The most common is, of course, a graduation or post graduation in accounting or finance, or you can be an engineer or an arts, science, or commerce graduate who has done an MBA afterwards. Most banks have management training programs into which they will have fresh graduates or postgraduates from a variety of disciplines. I, for one, an example, I'm a mining engineer by degree with an MBA afterwards. If I can move from mining engineering to banking, you can move from any discipline to banking. So, yeah, I mean, if you choose banking, even later stage in your career, after you finished your graduation, let's say in arts or
Mhm.
commerce or whatever, you can do an MBA and or a post graduation in finance and choose to move to banking. So, the doors are open.
Okay, makes sense. And could you briefly tell us what are the primary responsibilities associated with roles like maybe in particular retail banking, investment banking, and corporate banking?
As a banker, depending on your role within the bank, you might have very different responsibilities. As a retail banker, you might have to, manage products, for example, or branches, or achieve sales numbers. As a corporate banker, you might manage a set of customer relationships, a group of companies, or become an industry specialist, let's say in oil and gas or manufacturing. If you're an investment banker, you will probably help companies raise funding or make equity issues or explore mergers and acquisitions. As a private banker, you might manage the wealth of 100 individuals. You can do any of these things, or you might choose to be in a support role within a bank. That means you can be, let's say, in branding or marketing. You can be in credit management. You can be in operations, risk, finance, audit, or compliance, any of those things. In summary, it's a very wide choice of roles to choose from, and you will do, depending on what you sign up for. And there is nothing stopping you from changing your mind and moving from one role to another during your career in banking.
I always find it fascinating how character traits and skills shape the trajectory of a successful professional life. What character traits or skills do you believe have been essential to the success in your career?
That's a tough one. I would say the most important skill in banking is managing people, your customers, your colleagues, your suppliers, and your vendors. I think that's probably the single most important skill that I've developed over the last 36 years. Next is managing your time between a plethora of daily activities. It's important to focus on every day what you will do and what you will not do. And sometimes what you'll not do is far important than what you'll do. The third, I would say, increasingly, is the multidisciplinary approach to your work. The ability to connect dots between different areas that are apparently unconnected. For example, areas as unrelated as technology and design come together to create the most compelling mobile banking experience. Yeah. The best mobile banks, most mobile bank applications are a combination of very good technology and very good design, right? And ergonomics. So I think those three would be probably the three most important traits or skills.
Okay, well, just to sum up, it's people management, time management, and the ability to work in multidisciplinary roles.
That is correct. That is
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
And what are some characters or some character traits that you believe are underrated or not often discussed, but are crucial for success in the banking industry?
I call it the 4P model for success, not just in banking, but in any leadership role. The first P is passion. Passion is the love of and complete involvement in your profession. I believe that if you don't love what you do, the chances are that you won't be very successful. You might be successful, but you won't be a roaring success if you don't love what you do. The second P is positivity, the ability to be optimistic, come what may. A can-do attitude despite all the odds. To be positive in a world full of disappointments is very important today. The third P is perseverance. Never give up in the face of adversities, to be able to fail fast and to learn from your mistakes. And the fourth and final P for me is, strangely, paranoia. A paranoid mindset to constantly challenge yourself to do better. A vision of the future that is probably beyond tomorrow. A belief that unless you're constantly top of your game, you'll be overtaken. So unless you're a slightly paranoid person of challenging yourself, you can get complacent. So to me, it's a combination of passion, positivity, perseverance, and paranoia that makes a successful leader. Any role model that you think of probably
Yeah.
combines these four in some degree or the other.
Well, I love that model. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'd also like to ask you, is there one skill that you wish you had cultivated, that you think would have helped you immensely in your career? Just looking back?
Yeah, I guess which skill? A very simple one, which is typing with all fingers. I never learned proper typing on a keyboard when I was a student because those were days of pre-PC, right?
Yeah.
Pre-computer days when I grew up. Even today slows me down when I type emails, right? Because I type with one finger. But talk about the skills. The two I would single out that are underrated. One I would say is networking and presentation skills. I think networking within and outside your industry keeps you abreast of what's going on and challenges you to do better. On presentation and communication skills, I cannot stress the importance of starting on this from school days. Every profession requires you to argue, to present, or to otherwise communicate your analysis, your proposal, or point of view, any profession, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to just be a lawyer
Correct.
to need to talk. Even an artist needs to talk sometimes in an exhibition,
Correct.
right? To present his or her art. It is critically important to be heard. And the fact that I was a debater and elocutionist in school and my college days helps me even today every time I get up on a podium to talk. So I would say those two skills, apart from typing, are important in life.
I agree. And I think the public speaking skills or the presentation skills, as you mentioned, is something pretty key because that's something most youngsters shy away from. It's a skill that everyone's scared to cultivate or they think they're rubbish at it and they're scared to even try it, which is, I'm so glad you brought that up. All right.
Yeah.
Can you share like a memorable moment or an accomplishment from your banking career that you're particularly proud of, and that might inspire our listeners?
In my first role in banking, 35 years back, my very first role in banking was a product manager with Citibank. And I put together a product that combined a deposit and a life insurance policy. And I worked really hard to convince my seniors that it was a clever package because it addressed the need of customers to save and the need to protect one's family. And that, I'm happy to say, was a roaring success. The product called City Life went on to become very successful. So very proud about that because it was,
Okay.
the first package I created. Much later in my career, just about 6 years back in 2007, I launched Live, the Middle East's first digital lifestyle bank targeted at millennials, many of the people who are listening to this podcast today. We challenged our convention, we challenged ourselves as a conventional bank, and we created a paperless bank that combined banking and lifestyle. Today, Live has over 500,000 customers and inspired the launch of many digital banks in the region. So very proud about Live. And may I plug a line for those of you who don't have Live, open a Live account. I think you'll be happy with it.
Wow.
This podcast isn't meant to entertain you. It's meant to help you do life better by showing you how to think about and navigate important issues that aren't usually talked about to youngsters. But we believe that you need to hear this because it has the potential to change your life and the lives of other young people like you. So please share this episode with someone you care about, and if you haven't already, please hit the follow button. It helps us get these meaningful insights and messages in front of more youngsters.
Can you now talk to us about a particularly tough time in your career? What brought that on and how did you overcome it?
I think the pandemic in 2020, 2021 was one of the most challenging times that, we all have faced, I've definitely faced in my career. Business slowed down tremendously and suddenly face-to-face banking was out of fashion. So we had to quickly innovate and launch more digital services and products and channels for customers to use. So all the teams, the branches, sales, operations, technology, and marketing rallied together. And within weeks, we had launched new offerings that allowed our customers to talk to their bankers from home and fill in and sign digital forms. These are things we never did before, but necessity is a mother of invention, as we discovered. And I'll tell you something, banking has never been the same again, in terms of how digital it has become today over the last 3 or 4 years. Digital transactions today in the region contributed 97% of all banking transactions. Only 3% are left to be face-to-face.
Wow.
So we all, as bankers, converted a crisis to an opportunity to be more efficient and to be more efficient forever.
Young adults today are often undecided and face tough decisions about their career paths. What advice would you give them regarding making good career choices?
I think the first is to keep an open mind and research each career choice in detail. Do not be burdened by preconceptions that can often be wrong. Talk to actual professionals in the field to understand the opportunities and also the challenges of a career before you decide what you want to take up. The second, I would say, the practical advice to do as many diverse internships as possible in your high school years. So you familiarize yourself with different industries, right? You get to a newspaper, you go to a social service organization, you go to a bank, you go to an oil company. I mean, maybe figure out not what you will do, but what you will not do, right? You at least know I will not be in oil and gas. I will never be a journalist. So at least you can eliminate certain careers from your list, right? So that's an important one. And finally, I would say be prepared for a career switch. I believe the new generation of kids who are listening will
Yeah.
probably make 2 or 3 career switches in their
At
lifetime.
least, yes,
I mean,
at least.
yeah, at least. I think it's absolutely okay not to get it right the first time. I started in product marketing and corporate advertising in a consumer durables company, and I moved on to consumer banking as a career. So it's absolutely fine to start with one career and then decide to move on to something else. So don't try and get it 100% right the very first time. Most people don't. So that's absolutely okay. So I would think, those 3 pieces of advice is an open mind, internships, and the flexibility in your mind to shift careers if the need be.
I love that advice. That's amazing. All right. And would you encourage them to consider a career in banking?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a very rich career. It combines a number of disciplines, like I said before. If you like technology, if you like numbers, if you like people, if you like to, support growth of industry, all of that come together in banking. I think it's very rewarding. It's also, I must say, one of the best paid professions in this part of the world and
And
most
that's
parts of the world.
important. And that's very important.
That's important as well. So if you look at average salaries and bonuses that people make, I think banking and finance is right up there, along with consulting and technology. So that's not a small factor. So I would strongly encourage youngsters to look at banking and finance as a career. I don't just mean traditional banks, digital banks, there will be fintechs, but in this entire area of finance and banking. People like Bill Gates said famously, many years back, you don't need a bank, you need banking.
All right. I think networking is an important skill for young people to develop. Can you share some strategies for building a strong professional network, which can be particularly valuable for students and recent graduates?
Yeah, I would say build a strong profile on LinkedIn early on, maybe high school, may not be too early to start, and connect early on to experienced professionals in your field and other fields, right? Attend industry conferences once you start working and meet people, both peers and seniors. I think it's important you make a lot of friends and contacts at conferences. Speak if you can. If you can speak at a conference, nothing like it. And always, always try and be nice and helpful to people who cross your path. Very important advice. People you help are likely to help you in the future. So never, ever be rude or be unhelpful to people. I think it always helps to be nice to people. And that's something I've learned over the years that, people repay you back in so many small, different ways. You don't do it with the intent that they'll repay you, but you do it because of the goodness of your heart. But the rewards are not just personal satisfaction, but really the ability to get goodwill from people afterwards.
That's some advice in gold. I hope you youngsters are listening and taking notes. All right, here's one more.
Mm.
What's one thing you wish someone told you when you were younger that would have helped you immensely in your career?
I wish that my dad or my professor told me when I graduated that, friend, you know so little, go out and learn from other people. Because when we graduate, especially from a good school, like many of our listeners will do, you come out with a chip on your shoulder, thinking that you know everything. You are now an MBA from a hotshot school, and you come into the workplace, and everybody will look at you and say, wow, here comes, the best thing that has happened to us. Absolutely untrue. You know so little of a profession, which is a small part of our entire ecosystem, that the sooner you realize that, the better for everybody, especially for you, because there is just so much to learn from people around you and people who are not in your profession. I've learned so much from people who are not bankers. Just spending time with, with the sports people or artists or technologists or people in manufacturing or in trading. Everybody teaches you some part of what becomes a big picture in your role. If you think of Steve Jobs in Apple, he was originally a calligrapher and he understood art very well, but he also understood technology. And what he brought together in the entire Apple ecosystem, which you all love, is a combination of ergonomics, art, and technology, right? So this is something which is becoming more and more important today. And I think youngsters will realize that it doesn't matter if you're a PhD or MBA or a graduate from a top school, we all know so little. And therefore, if you have humility to come out and learn from everybody around us, the faster we'll grow and the more successful we can become.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about financial literacy. I know the listeners are, they've heard me talk about it a lot, but I'd like to get them to hear something from a banker's point of view. Why do you think financial literacy is so important, especially for this younger generation?
Madeline, I'm amazed sometimes at the lack of financial literacy that I see in today's young graduates and even postgraduates. Money management is unfortunately not a skill that is taught formally in schools. And I wish it was, I wish really it was. Young people need to understand how to save money, how to spend money, and how to invest money. They also need to understand how to budget their expenses, especially once they leave home and live independently from their parents. I mean, think about it. Each young person, especially anybody listening to this podcast, will work so hard to build a career, and one purpose of which is to earn money. Sadly, most of them, or many of them, will not or have not learned how to manage the money they earn. Isn't that a tragedy? You will earn money but won't know how to manage it, and therefore you'll actually waste money or not be able to invest in the right way. Which is why I think financial literacy is so critical early on in life. I have two daughters who have taught financial literacy from a very, very early stage in their lives. And I'm proud to say they manage their finances very well. They know what to do and what not to do with their money. And I think it's very critical for every youngster to know this from the age of maybe 10, 11. Yeah. Definitely by the time they're in their late teens, they should know how to budget, how to spend, how to save, and how to invest. And you're doing a great job in spreading that word in the region. But I wish every youngster took that up and did that as an essential life skill as they grow up.
Perfect. Okay. Here's another question that wasn't scripted. Is there anything that you used to spend time early on in your career that you now see as a complete waste of time?
I guess one area would be meetings, This is something that I've learned over the years, that most meetings are a waste of time, right? And minutes of meetings rarely get read. So we moved on from taking minutes to just taking action points in meetings and cut the meeting numbers down, cut the meeting duration down. And many companies adopt standing meetings only, so you don't sit down at a meeting. So that you keep it sharp and you keep it short. I think now I work with a couple of fintechs and I see I spend much less time in meetings and far more time in actually doing things, right? There's so much of time we waste in corporates, planning, debating, arguing, before we actually act on things. It takes a lot of our energy, yeah? And we have to move to a situation where we meet for shorter periods of time, decide on action, and move on and go do stuff.
That is such a fantastic answer. Okay, now before we let you go, Suvo, what message do you have for your young listeners?
Well, I thought I said a lot, but just a couple of parting messages maybe. One is, do not overplan your future. I think it's a rapidly changing world, and a majority of careers today might not survive in their current form in 10 years' time. So don't, spend too much time thinking of what will happen next. Be flexible and adaptable in your plans, but always watch the emerging trends very closely. That's my first piece of advice. The second piece is really learn to enjoy life. I think there's more to life than just a professional career. And you realize this more and more as you grow older. You cannot get back lost time. So it's important that, you spend a lot of quality time with, in your friendships and your personal and family relationships. I believe your true wealth is in the goodwill and love that you get from your family, your friends, and your colleagues. So I would strongly urge that you learn to balance your career and your personal life very early on. Well, those two are my two parting, if you like, pearls of wisdom. But I'd like to wish all the listeners a wonderful career ahead. As I said, learn to balance your personal and professional life, and by all means, learn to manage your money.
Thank you, Suvo. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you, Madeline. It's a pleasure talking to you and all our listeners.
Thank you for listening. I want to help you use what you learned here. And the best way to do that is to get a podcast buddy. That's someone who also listens to this podcast. Then talk to your podcast buddy about the one takeaway from this episode that resonated with you the most. That's it. That's all you have to do. Remember that much of what is talked about on this podcast is stuff that's not typically talked about to young people, and it should be. It's stuff that you need to know so that you can lead a life that's, you guessed it, smarter, richer, and braver. This is your host, Marilyn Pinto, signing off. Until next time.
If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to broach in our upcoming episodes, please email us at smarterricherbraver@gmail.com. And if you'd like to sign up for one of our award-winning programs, go to kfi.global and check out our upcoming schedule.